Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. Welcome back to Story Sundays Episode 2, the series in which I take your comments from the previous week's episode and I try and answer as many of your questions as possible about the zombies storyline. One change for this week is that I realised a great way for me to give back to the people who are supporting my channel by hitting the join button or becoming members of the channel would be for me to make sure that some member comments are answered in the videos alongside all the other comments that I answer. And so the first few comments that you'll see in this video will have the little waffle badge next to them. That shows in the YouTube comment section that you're a member, and so I know that I need to mix your comments in alongside everyone else's. So thank you to all the people who have hit that join button. One thing I forgot to say, I'm gonna be premiering this video on YouTube, which means it kind of acts like a live stream for the first watch of the video when it goes live. So there'll be a chat if you're watching this as soon as it does go up, where you can talk to me, I'll be in the chat, we can hang out while you watch the video for the first time. It's a premiere of the video, basically. I figured, hey, it's my birthday, I'll try something new and see what happens. Let's get into the questions now. First off, Faptimus Prime, who's probably having a bit of a tough time this November, has said, super hyped for Story Sundays, thumbs up brother, any clues in any of the released maps for DLC 1? I've chucked this question in straight away because I want to kind of step back from the question a little bit and just talk about the DLC season itself. Now that we're at the point where the majority of the kind of Easter eggs in the maps that have been released so far have already been solved, people are naturally going to be turning towards DLC and saying, okay, what are the details going to be? Where are we going to be going from here? Where do we go? And how is the story going to progress? But one of the things that I think is really important to note straight off the bat is that we don't even know which story we're going to see in DLC. Activision have been so cagey about saying anything relating to whether it's going to be an Ether map, or a Chaos map, or if it's going to alternate, or if it's going to be one story throughout the whole season, or what. We just don't know yet. And so, as much as I'd love to say, yes, we're going to Venus as the next map in the Ether story, I wouldn't be able to say with any confidence if that was actually DLC 1, because we might get Chaos for the first two DLCs, and then get Ether for DLC 3 and DLC 4. Like, we just don't know. Like, the best case scenario for me would be for them to do 2 Ether maps and 2 Chaos maps as part of that first DLC season, but for them to then just do another DLC season afterwards and give us a bunch more maps, and that could be the actual culmination of this kind of Ether and Chaos story arc, because 2 maps per story is just not going to be enough to actually move it forward far enough. So fingers crossed that's what they do and they give us 8 maps instead of 4, but maybe that's wishful thinking. So Prime, I'm not 100% because I don't know which story they're even going to be addressing. We'll have to wait and see. Justin, who's been a member for multiple months, and that's why his icon's a little different, says, Story Sunday question. How invested are you in the Chaos story? Is there anything you want to be explored more? Now, when I first heard that they were going in this direction with the Chaos story, I was really energized and excited by the prospect of them taking events from real life and giving them the kind of zombies twist that I loved that they did with Deriz, with Shinonuma, with all those OG maps back in the day. That's what got me into zombies in the first place, and so I was super excited that they were basically going to take that approach and reapply it in a new context with Chaos. Then I started listening to a load of audiobooks about the Crusades and about mythology and all sorts of stuff, and just starting to research, because for a long time, I've always been like a fan of history in school. I took history A-level, I really enjoyed it, history was one of my stronger subjects, but I always had a slant towards more modern history. Like, I really enjoyed history post kind of the year 1900, but before that, it just didn't hook me in the same way. But funnily enough, as soon as they pretty much announced that they were going to be going further back in time and stuff, I was like, you know what, I'll give this another shot. I'll see how bad it really is. And it turns out it's actually really interesting. I love Greek myth. I think that it's awesome, and that's a love that I didn't even know I had, and so I'm really glad that Zombies has kind of kindled that fire in me to explore it more. And so for the Chaos story, I just hope that they keep pushing in that direction and maybe give us a little bit more meat on the bones of it all, because so far they've played with themes from mythology, but I think that there's definitely a huge amount more room for them to explore in that regard. So just more of the same really would be fine for me, I think, and I'm sure that the story will get fleshed out over time. Ryan says, is there any story purpose behind there being a severed hand on multiple power switches, or was it just using assets over and over again, just asset reuse? This is a great question, okay? back in the day, on Nachtr und Toten, there was obviously no power switch, right? Then Verrückt came out, the second zombies map ever, and on the power switch, which was the first one we'd ever seen, there was a hand severed, just yeeted and repeated on that lever. And people were asking for a long time whether that had any significance, because we were just starting to put the very beginning building blocks of the story together, and there were a couple of elements of Verrückt that were very suspicious, the writing on the wall being one, and then that power switch hand being another. Then DLC 2 came out, and it was Shino Numa, and Shino Numa had this hanging dude with his parachute in the rafters of the map in the spawn room, and he also mysteriously had a missing arm. And so theories started popping up saying, what if the guy that's hanging here also lost his arm at Verrückt? And so what if he lost his arm trying to turn off the power so that he could save himself or free himself from the facility or something, and then he escaped, flew over Verrückt, and then his plane crashed or whatever, he parachuted out and ended up getting hung in the rafters. Now that character ended up being Peter McCain. So Peter McCain is one of my favorite characters because of the fact that he was embroiled in all of that really early story stuff that was happening back in World at War, and he's also been embroiled in new stuff in Black Ops 3, and soon to be, actually no, not even soon to be, and in Black Ops 4, because Peter is relevant in Classified. So as far as the power switch arms go, certainly back then, that arm was an integral part of that discussion, and it has meant that sort of catapulting it through to 2018, there is still a lot of discussion to be had about things like that in the maps. There were then a load of counter theories at the time about the fact that, oh, well, Peter's lost one of his arms, but on the power switch, it's the other arm, and so it can't be his arm, and there have been all sorts of crazy theories like that over the years discussing it, and so there is definitely significance to the hands on the power switches if you want to read into it in that light, for sure, I would say. Okay, on to the regular comments from the video. Wolfgamer asks a fantastic question that I love so much, man. I really, really love this question. I actually pinned it on the video. The question was, so, who has gone and shot Fluffy to get that soul in the house? It's great, because Fluffy's soul is clearly in the house, because Fluffy is there in the Origins cutscene with Samantha and Eddie. And it's something that I'd never thought about before, but I love the fact that Wolfgamer has mentioned it here. I absolutely love it. The fact that Fluffy is there suggests that Fluffy's soul has been saved. Or at least we'd assume so, seeing as that's kind of the point in the house. And so we have to kind of look at our story and say, well, Fluffy probably wasn't there before Samantha, because Maxis was the first person to go to the house, okay? The Maxis drone flies up in the Origins ending and goes to the house. And then Monty brings Samantha to the house, and then Eddie ends up going to the house, that's Kid Richtofen, and somewhere amongst that, we must have had, at some point, whether it was Richtofen or Monty or someone else, probably Monty to be honest, but someone coming along and being like, yeah, so we've saved Samantha, do you want to just save her dog as well? I don't know, man. I think that we currently don't have any information about when Fluffy's soul has been saved and put into the house, but I just think it's hilarious that you brought that up, so great comment there. Flebazorb220 says, how are both PreMoon Ultimas and PostMoon Ultimas in Classified at the same time? This is a great question. Classified is a weird map, okay? Because you end up in a situation where, as far as the previous story went, in the timeline, for example, that we read in Richtofen's interpretation of the Chronorium, the Ultimas kind of story ends at Moon. There isn't really any more there. And now we're getting Classified, which is basically a continuation of the stories of those characters, because in Classified we hear that they have come back from the moon, and Purnell says, I don't know what time they came from, but what's clear is that they have returned from the moon, and then they end up at Hangar 4. So their story has been continued from what we saw previously, but the map itself is set prior. Now this really isn't as big an issue as it might seem at face value, because we actually have an identical scenario happening over on the other side of the story with Blood of the Dead. In Blood of the Dead, we have one of the many loops round the story, round the cycle, and in that one of many loops, we have a Richtofen from a future loop, essentially. That's the post-war Richtofen coming back and appearing in a map that was taking place earlier in the loop cycle, but later in the chronology of events. I think the only real way to describe that one is to actually draw a picture, so I mean, that's why I've set this frame up with a whiteboard right next to me. You've got your loop going round and round and round and round and round and round, and in one of these loops, you end up with, basically, let's say this is the Great War. You end up with the Great War happening, and then they go round and round and round, and let's say Zetsubo's here. And at some point, you've got a little offshoot from Zetsubo where they go to Alcatraz, and we're essentially saying that the Great War Richtofen has ended up going and doing some other thing and going to his own new story, and then ending up basically there at Alcatraz. Now, you could argue if you wanted that it wasn't an offshoot there, and it was actually just part of the loop, but every loop was a fail while the cycle was unbroken, and so they just ended up being in stasis forever in Alcatraz instead of actually being woken up. But ultimately, we end up in a scenario at Alcatraz where you've got one set of characters who have gone round the circle itself and ended up there, and then another set of characters who've gone round this other kind of outside loop and ended up there as well. And so it's two of the same character who have ended up in the same time essentially, but it's just not a problem for zombies. That's a paradox that at this point we have kind of become at peace with, I would say. So that's why PreMoon and PostMoon Ultimas are both there and classified, and it's not an issue, because the PostMoon characters have come through to a different point in time where the PreMoon characters also are. Sir Prenicus, I think I've said that right, asks, what was the importance of the KN-44 blueprint in Black Ops 3? Good question. Real good question. The fact that we questioned that KN-44 for the entirety of Black Ops 3, and then Treyarch had the cheek to actually give us a further addition to all our questions with the Zombies comics. In fact, where is my Zombies comic? Oh, of course, it's right here. I can show you this right now. This page of the damn Zombies comic, where Monty is just casually scrawling the KN-44 blueprint out. What? I wish we had answers, man. I really wish we had answers, but we don't. We just don't. It's like, is that the way that we get our wall chalks in the maps? Is Monty using some kind of hypercube type thing to give us our wall weapons, and that's all that the blueprint is for? Is there more to it? Why is the KN-44 just everywhere in the maps, in the cutscenes and everything? It's just kind of a big mystery, to be honest. Now, I did make an entire video called There's Gotta Be More, What's the Deal with the KN-44? And I will link that on screen, I think up here? It might be up there, but I think it's gonna be up there. Go check that out. I'll also link it in the description down below. I made that just after Revelations came out, I think, in a series that I was making at the time called There's Gotta Be More, where I talked about unanswered questions in the zombie story, and that's got a bunch more info about the KN, so go check that out as well. Agent Zero says, question. I'm very confused about the story of Stanley Ferguson. I thought he was the original warden in Mob, but in Blood, he isn't. What's the deal? Well, great question. A lot of people were actually thrown by this because I missed Mob of the Dead, right? When Mob of the Dead came out, I was in school, and I actually was taking like a couple months off at the time to completely focus on exams, and so I didn't even know what MOTD stood for when MC Sportshawk messaged me on Facebook or something and was like, hey Milo, what do you think of MOTD? I was like, do you mean match of the day? Like, what is that? I had no idea. So I missed the map at the time, and then I had to sort of learn the story from what people had already researched and explored themselves at a later date. And so I, as well, just took what other people were saying as gospel and thought, oh, okay, people are saying that the warden is Ferguson, so I guess that's probably true. But then suddenly in Black Ops 4, we get all this information saying that, nope, actually we got baited and they're not the same person. The warden is one guy and Ferguson is another. And it turns out, because I actually went and did this like a couple days ago, that if you go back and listen to absolutely all of the mobsters' quotes in Mob of the Dead, there's only one quote, or at least I believe there's only one quote, that actually mentions the warden being thought to be Ferguson, and it's a Sal quote who's saying, hey, this guy reminds me of Ferguson, maybe they're the same guy. But it's like a suspicion as opposed to 100% categorically, this is a fact. And as far as I know, there isn't any other information in Mob that is categorical about the fact that he is the warden, and so I think that we all just assumed because of the fact that he's got the suit under all the armor, and it looks similar to the Night Guard suit that Ferguson has. But I guess Treyarch either saw that they had made one decision in the past and then changed their mind, or made it ambiguous intentionally originally and then decided to clarify in Blood of the Dead, and that's just the way it's going to be now. So Ferguson is one guy, and the Warden's another, and I guess that's just the way it is. Now, AJ says, why is 9 called 9? This is a great question. I think that there's a good chance that we won't have a proper answer for this until 6 months have passed or something since the release of Black Ops 4. Reason being, Jason basically said that to us already. We asked him, are we going to be able to know what the significance of 9 is once we play the map? And he was like, no, yeah. It'll probably take you a year or something. So there's a good chance we just won't know. However, there are some theories. Perfect timing for this is that a guy called Nat on Twitter just tweeted me and said there's a quote when you defeat the elephant on 9 that says, their champion defeated, the 9 can hide no longer. What was once theirs shall now be ours. Now, Nat was referring to a video that I made about a newly solved 9 Easter egg, which I will also link on the screen in one of the corners and in the description down below. That video talks about the priest and what his motives might be, a hidden library that might be related to DLC as well, and in that video I discuss this thing called the Museon, which is a research institution that you could think of as an equivalent to Group 935, and they are dedicated to the 9 muses. That's where they get their name. The Museon is talking about the 9 muses. Now, they're the muses of the arts from Greek mythology, and so that's a possibility as well, that 9 that we are seeing in the map is related to the Museon, which is related to the muses. So that's all mixed in there as well as the possibility that it's related to all sorts of other sets of 9 that you do get in mythology. Giovanni says, is Revelations Richtofen the only one that stayed frozen, or is the whole crew frozen in Alcatraz? I'm pretty sure that it's just Revelations Richtofen that gets frozen. And so when I was drawing this circle before, where did I put my pen? I drew this little offshoot. This should specifically be a Great War Richtofen, that's GWR, Great Western Railway, Great War Richtofen, that goes on this offshoot, but the other characters from the Great War do something else. So they spiral out of the loop as well, or, again, as I said before, you could argue that they continue on the actual loop trajectory, it's just that we don't know what they do in all the instances where the cycle is unbroken, but then when the cycle is broken, we do eventually meet up with them at some point, but that would be a later date after Alcatraz. So that would be like the crew being down there somewhere. So yeah, for now, I think that it's just Great War Richtofen that's frozen, and the other characters will appear sometime later. Okay, Blind Justice, or Blind Justice, says, why is there a grave for Peter McCain in the mobile version of Black Ops 1 Zombies? I'm really glad you brought this up, because Peter McCain, as I mentioned at the start of the video, was an integral part of the zombie storyline at the beginning of the story, and is now becoming a really important character again in Black Ops 4 and towards the end of Black Ops 3. I mean, the guy appeared in Revelations and we don't know why. Hello? That's a big deal. He is really worth exploring in my opinion, and as Blood Justice has said, he has a grave in the Black Ops 1 mobile game. Now, it's from that grave as well that you actually can get a Wunderwaffe. And so it's extra interesting because he's at Shinonuma, and that's how you get the wonder weapon on the map on the mobile game, and it just means that a whole bunch of story questions have to kind of crop up if we treat it as relevant information. But there's the kicker. It's not relevant information. It turns out this is something that I actually asked Jason about before Black Ops 3 even came out. When I was talking to him at Gamescom for the first time, we stayed up all night, we were chatting about zombies, I gave him a bunch of feedback from Black Ops 2 about things that I'd like to see improved in Black Ops 3, that you guys had fed back to me and that I basically passed on, and one of the things I asked was, is Peter's grave canon? Is it part of the story? And he turned to me and said, the mobile version of the game and the DS version of the game, I think as well, I think there's a DS version, both of those are not canon. So we do not need to worry about them in our understanding of the zombie story, which is a good thing in my opinion, because I don't want no graves for Peter McCain. My boy is alive and well. You can't tell me otherwise. I don't care if he died in some of the fractures. I don't care if he died in Gorod Krovi, although I don't even think that he died in Gorod Krovi. My boy Peter's alive, okay? Don't break my heart. You've already done it once with Richtofen. I don't need it done again. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Blind Justice. If we were taking it as being canon, the grave would probably be there because someone else had come to the facility, probably Purnell, to investigate why he lost his man, because in the classified radios, Purnell says, I lost a good man there, Peter McCain, but I never really figured out what actually happened, what actually went down. And so I could imagine that in an alternate turn of events, Purnell might have gone to Shinonuma, found his boy and then dug him a grave and actually put him to rest in a more respectful way. The only problem with that idea would be that Parnell doesn't actually sound like he cares much at all about the men that he sends to die. He's like, I was the bow, they were my arrows, and I just sent them to their deaths, but my ops were good, and so it doesn't really matter to him because he gets promoted because of it all. So yeah, that's why I'd say the grave is there, if it was canon, but it's not, so we don't need to worry about it too much. Okay, that wraps up episode 2 of Story Sundays. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Like I said last week, leave comments down below with the questions that you'd like answered for next week, and I might feature you on the show if you leave an interesting comment that would be really good to discuss with everyone and shine some light on in the community. I also just want to quickly say thank you for all the support on my channel recently. It's been phenomenal. You guys are the best. And also, I know that I've been getting a lot of questions about merch because I've mentioned that a couple times. My merch design is nearly done. I have a design coming very, very soon. We've also got waffle socks that are going to be coming back as well, I think, so look out for those. I'll put a link in the description down below so you can check out the details there. But the main merch thing that I want to have ready for Christmas is nearly here, and I think it looks pretty damn nice, so you can look forward to that very soon. Alright, I've been MrRoflWaffles, thanks for watching. Like I've said, drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in my next couple videos, and then obviously in the episode next week. Bye for now.